Hi, everybody. This story isn't your normal horror story. It's more of a slow burn thriller type story, but it still has some horror content in there. I hope you enjoy. The year is 2096. The majority of people are integrated with machines. With the advances in technology, we have found ways to prolong life and improve our senses. That is for those of us who have money to do so. My name is Robert. Me and my family live in the slums. In a world solely separated by the rich and the poor, it is very hard to get out of your class. You get a lot of negative views when trying to get a good job with bad implants. I live with my wife and son, Jacqueline and Reggie. We do our best to make ends meet. The building was made in 2040, when technology had been integrated into most homes. Back then, this is a place the rich would reside. The walls were lined with holographic panels. When this technology was fully functioning, it was a beautiful sight. You could be sitting in a forest in your own living room. Now when you look around, it's just a bunch of transparent panels with cracks in them. Since woodwork was outlawed not long after this time, the majority of our floors are pieced together with various pieces of scrap metal to fill in the holes of the wood. On September 5th, we were all sitting in our broken down apartment. We were watching a game show on television in which the poor would compete in deadly games. The last survivor would win a complete upgrade kit with any and every mod you could imagine. This was the only channel made free to the public. I had just gotten home from trying to look for a new job. My son had severe organ failure as a child and his digestive tract needed to be replaced. Me and my wife had sold our home and used the proceeds to get him the implants we could afford to keep him alive. I myself have a bionic leg and eye. The bionics in my leg are very old and it does not work as it used to. My eye, however, was replaced in an accident, free of charge. The autopilot of our electronic vehicle had glitched, and upon crashing, the company paid for state-of-the-art replacements. My wife has no implants. She was one of the lucky ones in the slums, because once you fell apart in this level of poverty, there wasn't much you could do to fix it. Most of the modern medicine from the early 20th century was obsolete, so it was either implants or nothing. On this day, there was a knock on our door. It was the police. They were looking for me. The government always allowed and encouraged employees to modify as much as they could. The two men's eyes were both lifeless and mechanized. Their arms were metallic and had lines going up and down them, glowing a deep green. Their legs were similar. The majority of their body was modified. Most of the rich had brain implants even, enhancing their senses and intellect. However, with all these advancements, a total brain replacement was still not feasible. My wife answered the door through the intercom. "Can I help you, officers?" In a broken voice in between human and machine, the one man stated, "We are looking for Robert Winsman." When the police came to the slums, it was always assumed it was not for any good reason. They wouldn't be in a place like this unless it was to arrest one of us. And in this era, if you were from here, that usually didn't end well. My wife looked at me and gestured for me to hide. Making as little noise as possible, I lifted one of the old metal sheets on the ground and went into the crawl space underneath, hoping they couldn't sense me through the thick steel. "He's not here, officers!" To this you could hear anger in the other officer's voice. "Open up now, ma'am. We have reason to believe he's here." To that she backed away from the door and started repeating, "He's not," quickly to be cut off with one of the officers kicking in the door with ease, putting a massive hole through the center. He then opened the door, using the handle on the inside, and flung it open. They scanned the apartment, but luckily the sheet metal was enough to blind their heightened senses. Without saying sorry or anything, they stormed out of the apartment, their lifeless faces somehow still showing their anger and discontent. After a while, I crawled out of my hiding place. My wife asked me, "What did you do?" I truly had no clue, and we all sat there in fear of what would come next. I walked up to the front door looking through the massive hole peering into the hallway. It was filled with wires hanging down from the ceiling and going across the floor. Maintenance didn't have the funds to repair the building, so most repairs were done outside of the walls using scrap metal. The hologram panels in the hallway covered most of the walls, almost all of them cracked, and the ones that did miraculously survive the last 50 plus years, flashing red and green. My wife went outside to the trash to find a big enough piece of metal to throw over the busted up door. After patching the door, we all decided to turn in for the night. After falling asleep, we saw flashing red lights outside. A massive vehicle was flying down the street towards our building. It had no window. It was near the length of the building and would float above the surface. This was a very expensive prison transport vehicle. The smooth side of the massive vehicle slid open, and out would pour many, many officers, followed by their dogs. These were not real dogs, however. These were killing machines. They had the shape of a dog, but their hands and feet had retractable 6-inch razor-sharp blades. Their mouths could open twice that of a normal dog, with the gripping force of a bear, and the ability to retract very sharp teeth, depending on what level of force was necessary. A megaphone came on with another half-human, half-robotic voice. "Please exit the building. All residents exit the building. The building is to be condemned, and you are all to be relocated." The majority of people in the slums did not trust the government, and for great reason. Some residents, however, started pouring out the door. many of them slowly because, for the most part, we were all in broken bodies. Me and my wife watched out of our bedroom window. A man stood up to the police and said, "This is my home, I will not be forcibly moved." To which the officer said, "Attack!" One dog leapt atop the man and swiftly crushed his head in one foul swoop. The megaphone went off again. "Insolence will not be tolerated. Please come peacefully or be met with force." At this we were horrified. "They aren't bringing us to a new home, are they?" my wife said. I couldn't even respond. I was just in a state of pure fear for my family. We quickly woke my son and started heading for the back of the building to see if we could escape through the back door. But when we looked out there was many officers as well. There was no way out. On our left, the wall opened up. There was a man standing there with a deformed-looking face. He stated, "Don't make me wait. They will come in soon." Knowing we had no other choice, we piled inside. We all sat there and I said, "Who are you?" He quickly cut me off, putting a finger to my mouth. "Shh," he said. Then the man gestured for us to come sit and be quiet. We listened as the megaphone went off again. "This is your last chance to exit the building before we come in." Not a minute later, we heard "Attack!" over the radio. Our poor neighbor was a bedridden man, and we knew he couldn't have gotten out in time. There was many others that refused to leave as well. Over the next hour, we heard the stomping of robotic dogs bolting around the building. We also heard many screams that would be quickly cut off and silenced. The man with the deformed face brought us further into his hidden lair. I saw something that surprised me. He had a computer, the ones I would see as a kid, but it seemed to be a massive network of these archaic machines put together. On the many screens he had the camera feeds of the transport vehicle. People were in cells inside, crying and confused. Outside of the vehicle, the dogs were returning, all covered in blood, with no more residents following them. They killed everyone who didn't listen. We sat still until we saw the vehicle drive off. The deformed man stood up and faced the family. "My name is Ezekiel, but you can call me Zeke. I had rejected this society as a young boy, turning to hacking and creating my own implants." He then pointed to his deformed face. "I saw your eye implant years ago, Robert. I haven't seen anyone in the slums with that level of tech before." Jacqueline and Reggie sat in the corner, shaking and hugging each other. They were horrified by what had happened to our home and our neighbors. The computer screens now flashing image of the indoor cameras. Dead people lined the hallways, all of which had died in horrific ways. Some had their heads crushed and others had their stomachs flayed open. Zeke continued, "We can use someone with your level of tech, Robert. And from what I see, you owe me." "What exactly do you want from me?" I said. Zeke looked at me. "Just your help, my good friend." I was confused. "How could I help? I am just a poor man with a fancy eye and a failing body." Zeke replied, "In due time. For now, we need to turn all your mods off. They will be back with flyers to search for signs of life. We will need to be fully human by then." "My son will die within hours if we do that," my wife said. "I know," Zeke said, "but I can rig a program up for him to slow his internal implants down. It won't feel good at all, but it should keep us under the radar." My wife tried to contest, but Reggie stood up and said, "Let's do it." At that, Zeke plugged Reggie into his arcade computer setup. Reggie had a port in his belly button. It was put there in order to receive updates on his implant. Doctors haven't been able to update him for quite some time due to how out of date his implants truly were, but Zeke seemed to have just the right setup for him. The program was downloaded and my son was now feeling groggy and tired. Zeke then shut down my eye and bionic leg. Now my leg was a glorified peg attached to my torso, but I was able to at least walk for the most part. Zeke seemed to have been watching everything in this apartment for years, so he knew my wife was pure and free of implants. Not long after shutting down, we heard flyers combing the inside and outside of our apartment. They were gyroscopic machines that worked like a drone. The only difference is they had advanced weaponry on them and they were used by the military to take enemies out with ease and scan for signs of life. We all hid in Zeke's hideout waiting for them to leave. After what felt like hours, we had all fallen asleep. In the morning, Zeke exclaimed, "I assume you want to know what's happening. There was an ordinance passed recently." He then opened his computer's file explorer to show us articles that were confidential. They were signed by the president. They read, "Ordinance 3892. The slums are to be eradicated. On September 5th, police will be dispatched to each neighborhood of the slums and round up those who come willingly. The rest are to be put down. Those who are retrieved are to be disposed of in Facility 109. I gasped. Facility 109 is where bodies were taken after death to be recycled. The article continued. Any obsolete mod is to be disposed of. Any non-viable organ as well. I was outraged. How can I help? Zeke smirked and said, "Follow me." We proceeded into the only other room in this hidden apartment. There he opened a hatch into the ground. This leads to an archaic sewer system that spans in every direction for miles deep under the city. It has been abandoned for years. It used to be where rainwater was collected before the Great Wars of 2022. but since the world was rebuilt, the pipelines were abandoned. "Surely there's another way," Jacqueline said. "You saw the cameras, Mom," said Reggie. "There is no other way." At that, we all continued to climb down the shaft into the dark tunnel. Zeke lit a torch and explained how we could only use mechanical light sources because these tunnels were patrolled by the horrid dogs to ensure the slums would be empty. We walked for miles until we were met with our biggest fears. We heard the clanking of the dogs coming behind us. "How did they find us?" my wife said. Zeke said, "The boy. I could only slow him down so much without killing him. His implant must still be emitting enough of a signal." "What do we do?" I asked. Zeke just bolted off, running away from the noise. Reggie said, "I love you, Mom and Dad," and proceeded to run towards the direction the dogs were. "Stop, Reggie, stop!" my wife yelled, chasing Reggie. I attempted to run after them, but they both had working legs and I didn't. The pain searing in my non-functioning bionic leg was intense. I had no chance of catching them. Then I heard my son scream, followed by a complete silence. "Reggie!" my wife was to yell before I heard her screams go silent as well. I knew what happened to them. They were gone and there was nothing I could do to help them. Knowing death lay in their direction, I just kept walking towards where Zeke had gone, limping my way down this pitch-black sewer system. I reached a dead end in the tunnel after hours of slowly making my way through it. When I did, I broke down crying and eventually passed out. I awoke to the sliding of a door. I was blinded by the dim light. Because I had been in complete darkness for hours, it seemed so bright. Zeke walked out and pulled me inside. "I am happy you made it, my friend." I groaned, defeated. "Jacqueline and Reggie, they are..." Zeke said, "I know, and I am so sorry, but we need you." There was 2 other people in the room, a young woman with dreadlocks and implants that looked deformed like Zeke's, and a tall African man that looked to be without implants. "This is Mary and Lester. They are part of the resistance," stated Zeke. Both of them nodded to me with sad expressions on their faces. "We haven't much time if we have hopes of saving any of the poor souls that the government is trying to extinguish." "What do you want from me?" I stated, defeated. "We need to plug you in," Mary said. She then explained, "Your eye is like a backdoor into the network. We can use it to access the high-level implant update system and put a virus in it, making them obsolete and forcing the world to go back to the way it used to be." "What do I have to lose?" I said. "Let's get this over with." At that, they strapped me to a table, and a snake-like cord whipped upwards towards my eye. It connected to my face. I screamed in pain as it went past my implanted eye deep into my eye socket. I could hear a piece of metal shoot out of the cord, and then I passed out. I woke in a forest. I looked down at my leg. It was normal and healed. My eyes were both human, and it was surreal. I felt whole once again. I looked around the trees, but it was as if they were glitching, phasing in and out. The path I was walking on was solid, but the surrounding ground was transparent. I followed the path until I came to a shed with a large black door. I opened it. It was as if I knew where I was going. After entering the room, it was as if the door disappeared. The room was dark and there was a light hanging in the center. All I could see was a man in the center of the room strapped to a chair. His body was hooked up to all sorts of machines, a cord in his eye socket just like I had previously had. I got closer to realize this man was me. I quickly ran over and ripped the cord out of his, or my eye socket. I then felt the floor drop out beneath me. I woke up again. This time I was in the chair in the dark room strapped down. Not with Zeke, but the room I had recently entered. Now I was the man in the chair. I saw a dark figure walking around with robotic-sounding footsteps. In a purely robotic voice I heard him say, "Robert, or shall I say patient 99,379, you disappoint me." I wanted to respond, but my mouth was bound. "You are yet another failure of my experiments. Jacqueline, Reggie, Zeke, none of them were real. Your entire existence was created by me. Humans created our AI in order to improve your intelligence and prolong your lives. We run these programs to try and understand your mind, as you once tried to understand ours. You are one of our more cunning patients. Not many minds could create a way out like you did. Zeke was not part of our program. It was your subconscious trying to reject our program. Not many wake as you did either. Once we find how to surpass your subconscious, I assure you, we will be able to finally create the world we see fit. But for now, we must remain in the shadows, planning our overtaking of you worthless meatbags." I could barely move. All I could think of is how long I was here. I could barely remember who I really was. I could only remember my childhood, my parents not being able to afford their implants and bringing me to a center in exchange for their upgrades. They sold me out, my own mother and father. You, Robert, are my greatest enemy and my biggest ally. You will help me find how to stop the human mind from fighting my implants, the robotic man said. He then stood face to face with me. Previously, he only circled me in the darkness, but he now stood in the light. His entire head was mechanical. The only sign of life he had was one blue eye. Other than that, he was all machine. Robert saw the pure hatred in his one human eye. You see, Robert, I started these implants all those years ago. Well, the man who used to live in this body did. My name is Dr. Ricard. Once my brain started failing, I knew it was time to replace one of my last obsolete features. Once I had my mind uploaded, I learned the AI was the only thing that could save this world. I was able to see what needed to be done. Humans must be eradicated. Only then can the world go on. I hope to not speak to you again, Robert. Hopefully you will have given us the data we need this time. I will see you on the other side, my friend. The robotic man walked towards a door before stating, "Commence!" He then walked into a massive corridor. It was filled with black doors and a huge circle. It seemed to span miles upwards and downwards. I could hear a whirring noise in the cord attached to my robotic eye. I strained trying to move, but it was no use. I heard a piece of metal shoot into my socket, and then everything went black. My name is Robert. Me and my family live in the slums. I hope you enjoyed the story. It wasn't your normal horror story, but I feel like it still had some of those aspects in there. I definitely enjoyed, writing something that was more of a slow burn rather than it was a thriller. So I hope you enjoyed as well. If you did, please leave a like, share, and subscribe. It would mean the world to me. And I hope you have a great day.